Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome for RTL online trainings and placements. Yesterday, there was an interview. The question was very simple, but most of the people will not be practicing. I'm going to show you that question and answer practically. When we are going to create an invoice, we are going to attach the payment term, right? So this payment term purpose is used to calculate the invoice due date. The purpose of payment term is to calculate the invoice due date. But the client requirement is when we receive the goods from the supplier. When we receive the goods from the supplier, there will be a receiving date. That will happen in inventory module. Let's say in inventory and procurement, there is a concept called receipt after purchase order. After purchase order, there is a concept called receipt. Once we receive the goods from the supplier, the invoice needs to be created. And the receiving date, whatever we have, goods receiving date, plus 4 days for receiving date, plus 4 days or whatever. So the invoice date, generally we take it as a terms date, but client requirement is they wanted to take this terms date as goods receiving date. That what we will do, we'll do that setup. What we'll do that, we'll go to FSM environment and we'll go to financials offerings, and then we'll choose common options for payables and procurement. The same way we have to explain. Generally, we'll do that setup in FSM environment by choosing this financials offerings. And then we'll choose this common options for payables and procurement and choose our business unit. And once we go to the business unit, sorry, not here, invoice options. This is for generating the accounting distributions. Go to invoice options. We are in another business unit. Let me change the view. Change the scope to our business unit. And we are going to select here, this is terms date basis. So what is the purpose of this terms date basis? Payment terms, start date for calculating the due and discount dates. Due and discount dates, both. Purpose is this. So from this date, a system will go for calculate. For example, if you mention that 3 days, payment due is in 3 days. That's a payment term you have created. What system will do? It will take the invoice date as start date. From that date onwards, 3 days, it will calculate and it will prepare or calculate the due date is that. Now here itself, we have the option goods received date. So here we have to choose goods received date. That's how we'll set up. This is fine. You will set up that goods received date, where you will inform to the system that I have received the goods from supplier on so and so date. If it is invoice date, generally when we open the page, we are going to enter the invoice date, right? Now let's see that. Let's go to Navigator, Payables, Invoices. Create invoice. We'll enter into invoice functional area and we'll choose the task create invoice. This we will call it as a functional area. These words are important when we are talking in the interviews point of view. When we are applying as experienced consultant, we are supposed to speak. If they ask you, can you configure any task? How will you do that particular one? We have to say that we'll enter into FSM environment and we'll choose financial offering and choose the task called manage invoice options and choose the BU. And there we will get payment terms date basis. See, I can enter the invoice date here. That's fine. So that system will consider The terms date is whatever the invoice date you have. But if it is goods received date, to be configured, so then we are supposed to enter when we received the goods from the supplier. Otherwise, how the system will come to know, right? So if it is invoice date, we have the flexibility here to enter. So where we will enter goods received date is by default, when we open this invoice page or invoice task, we don't find that particular field over here, goods received date. We are supposed to click this option called show more. When we click show more option, then we will be getting here goods received, invoice received, invoice date, then your terms date will be started from this. Okay. Now we have already configured for our US1 business unit. The moment whenever we choose our US1 business unit here, if I select the invoice received date is on 4th. Okay, 4th February 2023 we have received. Okay, and choose the supplier. Now, what you can see that here, the terms date is calculated from 4th February 2023. The terms date is calculated from 4th February 2023 because goods received date we have given. System is not considering the invoice date. Invoice date is on 8th February 2023 we have. And of course, we said immediate. That's why immediately due date also will be 4th February. And it means it's delayed. It's delayed, obviously, if the interest invoice is enabled for the supplier side, then system will calculate the interest invoice also, right? Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that net 30. So it means 30 days, 4th February 23rd to 30 days. I think it will go to March 8th or something because February, it comes 28 date. Let's see how the system will calculate the invoice date. You cannot enter the invoice lines because the invoice header is incomplete. Enter the required information. Yes. Okay, let me take it as a test invoice and I'm going to choose $10,000 standard invoice. Let's go to the lines information. Let's go for calculate the invoice, validate the invoice here. Needs validation is because of taxes here. Let me modify the tax here. I'm just making the taxes at 0. Right. Go for save it. And then let's go for validation again. The system invoice is validated. And payment terms is net 30, right? And we have already specified it should consider the goods received date, not the invoice date. Okay, let's go for calculate accounting entries here. Now accounting entries has been calculated successfully. Both accounting entries has been generated here. And we can find here, of course, header is there one and line is there, and we have assigned distribution set. So obviously we'll find distributions here. due to this distribution set, we'll find distribution invoice amount has been distributed to the different accounts here. And this is invoice number. Let me go for save and close and try to search for the invoice here. Go to manage invoices, invoice number, and click search button. Test 1 is the invoice number here. Click on this. So now I would like to go for make the payment. Invoice actions, pay in full. Here we have electronic is the payment method, right? So payment method, if we want to go for change, for example, if the client says that let's change the payment method here, payment method we are supposed to change. So payment term is net 30 we have assigned, right? Copy. Payment term, if we want to change, manage installments. By default, we can find it here electronic. And here we can find our invoice due date. What is the due date? 10th March 2023. 10th March 2023. So 4th February 2023 plus 30 days. Plus 30 days. So February it is we have around another 24 days, right? 24, another 6 days. It comes as March 10th here. This is how system is going to calculate over here. And if at all we want to change the payment method, we can go for change here. We can go for change here. It is. So while creating an invoice, we are going to enter the payment due date. Sorry, invoice date, as well as we are going to enter the goods receiving date. Sometimes what will happen, even if you said system should consider goods receiving date, but still it will be taking invoice date. Still it used to take the invoice date. Okay, invoice date is the terms date. So the reason is the same setup will be configured at supplier site level also. Supplier site level also. So at business unit level, we have configured payment term due date is based on the payment term due date is based on the goods receiving date. We have selected a business unit in FSM environment, and then we have selected manage invoice options, and we choose the business unit and configured. So at BU level, we have done. Supplier site level also, we can specify which date system should take for this supplier. But client suppliers, some suppliers will be having, right? So I don't want to take the goods receiving date for all the suppliers. Some of the suppliers, system should consider the invoice date or a goods receiving date. So what you can do is, you can do it at supplier site level also. Then high priority is supplier site, because that is the lowest level, right? So at BU level, if you do some setup, that is applicable for all the suppliers who are associated with that business unit, all the supplier sites which are associated with that particular business unit. But if you do it at supplier site level, that is applicable only for that particular supplier site. That is the high priority. Now I just wanted to check which setup is there for this supplier site invoice due date basis. Okay, so we have to choose this supplier advanced corporation. Let me try to search here. Now go to procurement suppliers, search for the supplier, manage suppliers. Go for edit. When we go for edit this supplier, then we will be able to find the supplier information here. It's taking long time. Now here we can find supplier information, but when we go for supplier sites, supplier level, generally we don't find. Now what system is showing, you can maintain sites only if you are a procurement agent with access to manage suppliers. The user, whoever is logged in, this person is not a procurement agent, means he is not a buyer. And even if you are a buyer, you can't get directly supplier information. You must have the access to the supplier's role. What is the role required to access supplier information? Supplier manager. Supplier manager is required. So you must log in as a buyer, and also you have to go with the role called supplier manager. So I'm not going ahead with this user. Let me go with the buyer. So I'm going to log in as a buyer. We already discussed how to hire employee, how to make employee as a buyer, how to assign the supplier manager role and data access, configuration of complete supplier setup. We have already discussed. Now I'm going to log in as a buyer because most of the people getting confusion over here. I have created supplier, but when I try to create supplier site, system is not allowing me to create. We are not getting plus symbol enabled. System is showing address is not exist. It's because of approvals and all. Let's go to suppliers and search for the supplier here. Manage suppliers. Go to supplier sites here. Edit. Invoicing tab. We'll find this. For this supplier site, you can make the configuration. So these values will be applied. Here is option, terms, date, basis. And you can also associate the payment term. So let me choose the default payment term for this supplier site as net 30. So in the previous time, when we try to create an invoice, system took immediate, right? How it has taken immediate is the default. It has inherited from the task called manage invoice options. But now that is default for all the suppliers who are in business unit called US1 BU. But right now, what I have mentioned, system should overwrite that payment term with this, and term date basis also I have specified goods received for this supplier site. Right. Let me go for save and close. We'll try to create an invoice now. Go to navigator here. We can also raise the invoice from here itself. This buyer is having the permission to raise the invoices, but he does not have the permission to make the payment. I don't think so he can make the payment. He cannot do it. So let me log in with us. another user who is having permission to write the invoice and making the payments. Payables, invoices, create invoice. We don't find any payment term here. I'm going to choose US1 business unit. Now I got immediate payment term here. The moment whenever we select the business unit, we got here. I'm going to select supplier name here, supplier name, supplier site. Immediately payment term has changed. Net 30. And let me go for show more option. And goods received date, I'm going to specify here February 1st. Obviously, it takes February for terms date should write. I have removed it, it seems. Let me change again. Create invoice. Select US1 BU. Click show more option. Immediately we got advanced supplier. Supplier site here. Goods received date I'm changing to 1st February. Terms date also changed for the same date. From that date it will be calculated. I'm going to specify the invoice number as test 9. Amount is so and so amount. And try to enter the invoice line here. Save. Now invoice validations is not validated. Invoice is not validated. Let me go for validate the invoice here. Make some changes. This taxes comes from Fusion Taxes module. In Fusion Taxes module, tax regime and tax calculation will be configured and assigned to the business unit. That's the reason we are going to get it here. We'll get the invoice when we go for manage installments. We can find again the invoice due date is this. So payment term setup is done successful. But when we go for installments, it should get 3rd March, not 10th March. 10th March means it's going to take the invoice date. Again, it's going to take the invoice date. It should not take the invoice date, right? So let me create the invoice again here. This is fine. The moment when we are going to select supplier site, it's taking terms date as this. And if I go for enter invoice amount, Let's go for manage installments. Now it's taking 3rd March. So entry needs to be done properly at the time of entry. If it is not taking immediately, then it go with the invoice date. Now it's taking February 1st, 2023 is the terms date plus 30 days. Obviously, March 3rd is going to be the invoice. Okay, so now we'll create a distributions line here. Save this invoice. Validate the invoice. We can find installments here, electronic, and make this payment method as a check payment method. If required, we'll go for save and close. Right. So then we'll go for make the payment for the invoice. Okay. Save and close. Test 8 is the invoice. Invoice has completed successfully. Its invoice is validated, accounted, payment is not done. So when we want to make the payment, as usual, we'll go for navigator and try to make the payment here. So where do we perform the payment? Here it is. Okay. So that's how we will go for specify goods. The question was very simple, like where do you will mention the goods receiving date at the time of creating invoice option? We'll click show more option and choose goods receiving date. And then whenever you are going for supplier site level also, we can go for change. If you change at supplier level, that will be the high priority. System will consider supplier site is the high priority. In case if it is purchase order invoice, once we create purchase order in procurement module, we'll receive the goods, whatever the receiving date is there, purchase order receiving date, that will be populated here automatically. So in PO module, when we create purchase order, we'll enter the information, headers, lines, shipment and distribution. In shipment level, we'll find what is the received date. From there, it's going to take. From there, it's going to take. So we can take another cycle. I'll try to prepare another video about purchase order received date, pick up from purchase order page. So that will be an additional exercise we can do. Okay. Thank you.